When Marcus Rivera walked into CEO Elena Reeves's office at 5:38 on a Tuesday morning and found her standing, half-dressed, in the soft glow of emergency lighting, he thought his career was over. He was wrong. The accident would save both their lives. He just didn't know it yet. The tool bag slipped from his fingers and crashed against the marble floor, shattering the profound silence that existed only in spaces where powerful people made decisions that changed lives without ever seeing the faces of those affected. The fluorescent work light clipped to his belt swung wild, throwing shadows across walls lined with awards and framed magazine covers. Elena Reeves stood frozen in the center of her corner office, one arm threaded through the sleeve of a cream silk blouse, the other clutching the garment bag hanging from her desk chair. She wore a black pencil skirt and a bra so delicate it seemed barely there. Mahogany hair falling in waves across bare shoulders that caught the light like polished wood. For one endless second, neither of them moved. The world compressed into that single moment. Her skin pale against dark fabric, the curve of her collarbone, the vulnerability of exposure in someone who'd built an empire on never showing weakness. Then reality crashed back in. Marcus's hands flew up, palms out, as if he could physically push away what he'd seen. Words tumbled out in a desperate rush that made his voice crack. "I'm so sorry. I was just testing the lights. I didn't know anyone was here. I thought the office was empty." Elena's dark eyes went wide with shock that matched the horror flooding through his veins. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. Marcus backed toward the door so fast he nearly tripped over his own boots, his face burning with humiliation that made his ears ring. "Please, I have a daughter. I need this job. I swear I didn't see anything. I was just checking the switches after I reset the breaker. I didn't mean to—" "Turn around." The command stopped him mid-retreat. Marcus spun so fast the room tilted, facing the frosted glass door and the blurred shapes of the reception area beyond. Behind him, he heard the whisper of fabric, the sharp zip of the garment bag closing. Every muscle in his body locked rigid, waiting for the explosion, the rage, the inevitable consequences of the worst mistake of his professional life. He'd walked in on Elena Reeves, CEO of Sterling Technologies, the woman who could end his career with a single phone call, the woman who held his entire fragile existence in her perfectly manicured hands. His mind raced through everything that would follow: security escort, HR meeting, termination for cause. No unemployment benefits, no reference, no way to explain this on future job applications. The apartment they could barely afford would be gone in 60 days. Lily's school, her after-school program, the neighbor who watched her in the mornings, all of it built on the foundation of a paycheck that was about to disappear because he'd been stupid enough to open a door without knocking. "I swear I didn't see anything. I was doing my job, testing the circuits. I didn't know you were in here." The words kept spilling out, filling the silence with his desperation. Behind him, soft sounds of Elena dressing. Seconds stretched into eternities. His breathing came ragged and panicked, loud enough that he was certain she could hear it too. When she finally spoke again, her voice was controlled, carrying something underneath that he couldn't quite identify. "What's your name?" "Marcus Rivera, ma'am. Maintenance staff, electrical clearance. I've worked here 3 years. I've never had a complaint. I swear this was an accident." "I heard you the first time." A pause that felt like falling. "You can turn around now." Marcus turned slowly, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. Elena Reeves stood behind her massive desk, now fully dressed in the cream blouse and the same black skirt. Her hair was pulled back in the severe style he recognized from that glimpse in the lobby months ago. She looked every inch the CEO again, all traces of vulnerability erased. But her dark eyes studied him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "Look at me." It was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. Meeting Elena Reeves's gaze felt like staring into a searchlight, but he forced himself to do it. She deserved that much at least, an acknowledgement of what he'd done, an acceptance of whatever judgment she was about to deliver. Her face was unreadable, a mask of perfect control. But something flickered in her eyes as she looked at him. Not anger exactly. Something more complicated. "You really didn't know I was here?" It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway, his voice hoarse. "No, ma'am. I swear. The work order just said electrical malfunction in the CEO's private office wing. I reset the breaker in the panel, and I was testing all the switches to verify everything was functioning. I thought the whole floor was empty this early. There's never anyone up here before 7. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists at his sides, trying to stop the tremor. "I understand if you need to fire me. I understand I don't have any excuse. I just want you to know it was an accident. I would never..." "Stop talking." Marcus's jaw snapped shut. He could hear his own heartbeat, a frantic percussion against his ribs. Elena walked around her desk with measured steps, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made the air between them feel charged. "You're terrified." It was an observation, delivered in a voice that seemed genuinely curious. "Yes, ma'am." "Of me, or of losing your job?" "Both. Mostly of losing my job." The truth fell out before he could stop it. "My daughter, she's 7. I'm all she has. I can't afford to lose this." Something shifted in Elena's expression, recognition passing across her face like a shadow. She studied him for another long moment, and Marcus felt like he was being catalogued, assessed, measured against some criteria he couldn't begin to understand. "The door was unlocked. I should have secured it. That's on me, not you." Marcus blinked, certain he'd heard wrong. "Ma'am, I was doing my job testing the electrical system. You were working. I should have knocked, should have announced myself before." "You were doing your job testing the electrical system. I was careless." She turned away, moving back to her desk with that same controlled grace. "What you saw stays between us. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am, absolutely. I would never say anything to anyone, I swear." "Good." She picked up a tablet from her desk, her attention already shifting to whatever waited in her schedule. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what was happening. She wasn't firing him. She wasn't even yelling at him. He'd braced for disaster and instead found something he didn't have a name for. "Ma'am?" The word came out before he could stop it. Elena looked up from her tablet, and for just a second her mask slipped. What he saw underneath wasn't anger or ice or any of the things he'd expected. It was exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep weariness that recognized itself in another person. "I really am sorry." "I know you are. Now go." Marcus grabbed his tool bag and fled, his legs unsteady as he escaped from the office. He tested the remaining switches with shaking hands, documented everything on his phone, and made it to the freight elevator before his knees gave out. He leaned against the cool metal wall, his heart still racing, trying to understand what had just happened. She'd let him go. She'd seen his terror, heard his desperation about his daughter, and she'd chosen mercy over the punishment he deserved. Why? The question followed him through the morning's remaining work orders, through the mechanical routine of fixing broken things while his mind spun in circles. By the time his shift ended at 3, he'd convinced himself the incident was behind him. A close call, a lucky escape, nothing more. 2 days passed. Marcus reported for his shifts, kept his head down, and tried to pretend his hands didn't shake every time he saw someone from the executive floor. He fixed a leaking pipe in the 4th floor bathroom, replaced fluorescent tubes in the 2nd floor conference room, unclogged a drain in the cafeteria. Invisible work for invisible people. The rhythm of his days remained unchanged, except for the sick twist in his stomach whenever he thought about that frosted glass door swinging open. Thursday afternoon arrived with all the weight of inevitability. His phone buzzed at 2:17 with a message from HR. Marcus Chen, please report to Human Resources immediately. 4th floor, Suite 400. His stomach dropped through the floor. This was it. They'd decided to fire him after all. Probably wanted to do it officially, with paperwork and witnesses. He should have known the reprieve was temporary. The 20-minute grace period before his shift ended felt like walking toward an execution. The HR suite was all neutral colors and uncomfortable furniture designed to make difficult conversations slightly less awful. The receptionist barely looked up when Marcus gave his name, just gestured toward a conference room where a woman in a gray pantsuit waited with a folder. Mr. Rivera, I'm Linda Walsh, HR Director. Please sit down. Marcus sat, his hands gripping his knees hard enough to hurt. If this is about Tuesday morning, I can explain. This isn't disciplinary, Mr. Rivera. Linda opened the folder and slid a document across the table. The words swam in front of Marcus's eyes, refusing to resolve into sense. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned from general maintenance to senior electrical specialist for the executive floor. It's a permanent position with a significant salary increase and enhanced benefits package. Marcus's vision blurred. The numbers on the page wouldn't hold still. 52,000 to 127,000. Nearly double his current salary. Health insurance that covered dependents, which meant Lily's dental work. The braces she'd need next year. The checkups he'd been putting off because the co-pays added up too fast. I don't understand. The position was created based on a recommendation from Ms. Reeves herself. She indicated that the executive floor requires dedicated technical support with electrical expertise and, Linda consulted her notes, demonstrated discretion and reliability under pressure. The words landed like physical blows. Marcus stared at the document, at the salary figure that represented everything he'd been drowning for lack of. Rent he could pay on time, food that wasn't stretched across 5 meals, clothes for Lily that didn't come from thrift stores, a life that didn't require constant calculation of which bills to pay late. Ms. Reeves recommended me. His voice came out strangled. That's correct. The salary is detailed on page 2. You'll also receive health insurance that covers dependents, which I understand is relevant given your daughter. Linda's professional demeanor softened slightly. This is a good opportunity, Mr. Rivera. The executive floor position comes with better hours, better benefits, and direct exposure to company leadership. If you perform well, it could open doors. Doors. The word felt like a foreign language. Marcus looked down at the numbers again. The salary was almost double what he currently made. The health insurance would cover Lily's dental work she needed. The hours meant he could drop her off at school every morning and pick her up every afternoon. Actually see her during daylight instead of kissing her goodbye while she slept and coming home after she'd already gone to bed. It was everything he needed, everything he'd been drowning for lack of, and it came from Elena Reeves. I don't understand why. After what happened? Ms. Reeves's recommendations don't require explanation. Do you accept the position or not? What choice did he have? What choice had he ever had? Yes, I accept. That evening, alone in his apartment after Lily had fallen asleep, Marcus pulled out his phone and searched through his work emails. Something had been nagging at him since he left HR, a detail that didn't fit. He found what he was looking for buried in messages from 3 weeks ago. A forwarded request from Sarah Mitchell, Elena's executive assistant, asking for maintenance records for all electrical work on floors 12 through 20. The timestamp showed 2 weeks before the incident with the frosted door. He opened his personnel file on the company intranet, something he'd never bothered to check before. The access log made his breath catch. Last accessed by E. Reeves, date 3 weeks ago. She'd been looking at his file before he ever walked into her office, before he saw her vulnerable and exposed, before any of it happened. Marcus sat back, his mind racing. The incident hadn't been the catalyst. It had been something else, something that happened before he ever opened that frosted glass door. He thought back to those weeks, trying to remember anything unusual, any interaction with executives or situations that might have drawn attention. Then it hit him. 15th floor, 2 weeks before the incident. He'd been troubleshooting a complex HVAC failure, teaching a junior technician named Martinez how to diagnose sensor feedback loops. The work had taken 3 hours of careful explanation. Marcus had drawn diagrams on his tablet, walked Martinez through each step of the diagnostic process, made sure the kid understood not just what to do, but why. The theory behind the practice, the logic of elimination, how to read the system's language. They'd been deep in the mechanical room when Marcus had looked up and seen a figure in the hallway. Just a shadow, really, someone watching through the half-open door. He'd assumed it was building management doing rounds and hadn't given it another thought. But what if it had been her? What if Elena Reeves had been watching him work, listening to him teach, seeing something in that moment that made her pull his file and consider him for a position that didn't even exist yet? And then the incident happened, and instead of being the disaster that ended his career, it became a test he didn't know he was taking. A test of discretion under pressure, of character revealed in crisis. Marcus pulled up the acceptance email from Linda and read through the job description again. Senior Electrical Specialist for the Executive Floor, responsible for all electrical, HVAC, and general facilities systems. Primary location, 23rd floor. Report directly to David Park, but with priority response to executive wing requests. You start Monday morning. Report to the executive reception desk at 7. 3 days. He had 3 days before he stepped into a world where Elena Reeves would be a constant presence instead of a distant, terrifying legend. 3 days to figure out how to be invisible to someone who'd already seen right through him. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability pressing down on Marcus's chest. He stood outside Sterling Tower at 6:45, watching his reflection waver in the glass facade. The new badge felt heavy in his pocket, a small piece of plastic that somehow represented the distance between who he'd been last week and who he was supposed to become today. He'd dropped Lily at school early, endured her questions about why he looked so nervous, promised her they'd celebrate his new position with pizza Friday night. She'd hugged him extra tight before running to join her friends, and the warmth of that small body against his chest was the only thing keeping him from turning around and walking away. The executive floor at 7 in the morning was a different world than the silent space he'd encountered during the emergency call. Now it hummed with controlled energy. Assistants arranging schedules. Junior executives clutching coffee like lifelines. The soft ping of elevator arrivals delivering the day's first wave of ambition and anxiety. Marcus felt immediately out of place, a maintenance worker in navy blue surrounded by tailored suits and clicking heels. The reception desk curved along one wall like a spaceship console, all blonde wood and embedded screens. The woman behind it looked up as he approached, her smile professional but not unkind. "Marcus Rivera, I'm supposed to report here for Executive Support Services?" "Yes, we've been expecting you. I'm Rachel. You'll be working primarily with me for coordination. Miss Reeves's executive assistant, Sarah Mitchell, will brief you on protocols in a moment. She's just finishing with the morning briefing." Rachel gestured toward a seating area that looked like it belonged in an art gallery. Marcus perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent, his tool bag resting between his boots. Around him, the executive floor continued its choreographed dance. People moved with purpose, their conversations happening in low tones that suggested everything discussed was confidential and crucial. "Mr. Rivera," Marcus stood quickly, nearly knocking over his tool bag. The woman who'd spoken was in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed in charcoal gray, with sharp eyes that assessed him in a single glance. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, Ms. Reeves's executive assistant. Follow me, please." She moved like someone who'd learned to navigate these hallways in her sleep. Marcus followed, acutely aware of how his work boots sounded against the marble compared to her nearly silent heels. They passed through the main executive area into a corridor he recognized from his emergency call, the path to Elena's private wing. His pulse quickened despite himself. Sarah led him to a small office he hadn't noticed during his first visit, tucked discreetly near the electrical panel. It was modest by executive floor standards, but palatial compared to the basement break room where he usually left his things. A desk, comfortable chair, built-in cabinets for equipment, and a window that actually showed the city below. "This is your workspace. You'll maintain all systems on this floor with priority given to Ms. Reeves's immediate area. Response time for her requests is 10 minutes maximum. All other issues should be resolved within the hour unless they require parts or outside contractors." She handed him a tablet. "This links to the building management system. You'll receive all work orders here along with Ms. Reeves's schedule so you can plan maintenance around her meetings and commitments. That schedule is confidential. You don't discuss it with anyone, including other maintenance staff. Understood?" "Understood." Ms. Reeves values 3 things above all else: discretion, efficiency, and invisibility. Your work should be seamless. She shouldn't have to think about whether the lights work or the temperature is comfortable. If she notices you at all, it should be because you've solved a problem before it became her problem. The irony of being told to be invisible by the woman whose boss had personally promoted him wasn't lost on Marcus. He kept his expression neutral and nodded. Questions? 1,000 of them. None he could actually voice. "No, ma'am." "Good. There's a staff briefing every morning at 6:45 in the main conference room. You're expected to attend. It covers the day's schedule and any VIP visits that might affect your work. Start your systems check at 7:30. Miss Reeves arrives between 8 and 8:30, and everything should be perfect before she walks through that door." Sarah paused, and something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Miss Reeves doesn't make recommendations lightly, Mr. Rivera. She saw something in you that made her believe you belong up here. I suggest you prove her right." Before Marcus could respond, Sarah was gone, her departure as efficient as everything else about her. He stood alone in his new office, surrounded by the trappings of a life he'd never imagined, and wondered what exactly Elena Reeves had seen. The first week passed in a blur of learning protocols and staying out of sight. Marcus memorized the building management system, familiarized himself with every circuit breaker and HVAC control, discovered that the executive floor had more technology packed into a single level than the rest of the building combined. Smart glass that adjusted for light levels, climate controls that responded to occupancy sensors, conference room systems that cost more than luxury cars. And through it all, he caught only glimpses of her. A flash of mahogany hair as she strode past, her voice carrying through a conference room door, crisp with authority. Once he was replacing a malfunctioning light fixture in the hallway when she emerged from a meeting. Their eyes met for half a second before she looked away and continued walking. She gave no sign of recognition, no acknowledgement that he existed beyond his function as the person who kept her world running smoothly. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like standing in a room where all the air had been sucked out. Marcus told himself it was better this way, professional, clean, a clear boundary between the man who fixed things and the woman who commanded empires. He was here to do a job, collect a paycheck that was transforming his daughter's life, and maintain the discretion Elena valued so highly. That moment in her office, when he'd seen vulnerability crack through her armor, was an aberration. A mistake they were both pretending had never happened. But late at night, lying awake in his apartment that suddenly felt less cramped thanks to the breathing room in his budget, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the question that had haunted him since he signed the transfer papers. Not why she'd promoted him. He'd pieced that together from the timeline and the file access logs. She'd been watching him work, evaluating his competence, considering him for this position before the incident ever happened. The frosted door had been a test of character, and somehow he'd passed. What he couldn't figure out was the exhaustion he'd seen in her eyes when she'd said those 4 words. "I know you are." Like she'd recognized something in his desperation that resonated with her own hidden truths. Some kinship between a maintenance worker drowning in single parenthood and a CEO drowning in expectations she couldn't escape. The answer came on his 8th day, in a moment that redefined everything he thought he understood. It was late afternoon, almost 6, and the executive floor was emptying as people departed for dinner meetings or headed home to families and lives that existed beyond these walls. Marcus was in the main conference room testing a video system that had glitched during a presentation that morning. The technology was sophisticated enough that the manual read like a foreign language, but he'd spent 2 hours breaking down each component until he found the faulty HDMI processor. He was on his back under the conference table rewiring connections when he heard voices approaching. The conference room door opened and footsteps entered. "I don't care what the legal team says. We're not settling." Elena's voice cut through the air like a blade. Marcus froze under the table, his hands still on the cable bundle. Brian knew exactly what he was doing when he violated that non-compete. Elena, the optics alone. A male voice, older, trying for reason. The optics of backing down are worse. "We set a precedent here. Every executive we've ever signed walks away thinking they can steal our clients and we'll just negotiate a settlement." Heels clicked closer. Marcus could see expensive shoes through the gap between table and floor. Elena's black heels. A man's polished Oxfords. "Schedule the deposition. I want him on record lying about his intentions." The door closed with a soft click. Marcus held his breath, trying to make himself smaller, invisible. His heart hammered against his ribs loud enough he was certain they could hear it. "You're being unreasonably aggressive about this." The man's voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "Brian was your father's hire. Going after him publicly damages Robert's legacy." "My father's legacy is secured by the company's success, not by protecting executives who betray us. Or are you suggesting I should prioritize sentiment over strategy, Victor? Victor. Marcus recognized the name from company newsletters. Victor Donovan, one of the senior board members. Silver hair and expensive suits, projecting authority that expected deference. I'm suggesting you remember that some of us have been with this company since before you were born. Your father trusted Brian. Perhaps you should consider whether my judgment has increased this company's value by 42% in 2 years. My judgment acquired Techline and Meridian when everyone said we were overextending. My judgment... She stopped abruptly. Is someone in here? Marcus's heart stopped. He'd been so still, barely breathing, but somehow she'd sensed him. The maintenance technician, Victor said, and Marcus could hear the disdain dripping from every syllable. Perhaps you should have him escorted out before we continue discussing confidential matters. Silence stretched for 3 beats of Marcus's racing heart. Rivera. Not a question, a statement. Elena knew he was there. Marcus slid out from under the table, tool bag in hand, his face burning with embarrassment and something else. The sick realization that he'd just overheard a conversation he had no business hearing. I'm sorry. I was fixing the video system. I didn't mean to intrude on... Did you hear our conversation? Victor demanded. Marcus recognized him now. Silver hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Expression that suggested he expected immediate dismissal, security called, possibly legal action. I heard voices. I didn't listen. It was a distinction without a difference, and they all knew it. Victor's expression said he expected Elena to fire Marcus on the spot, but Elena just studied him with that same unreadable intensity he'd seen in her office 2 weeks ago. Finish your work. Then leave. Yes, ma'am. Marcus turned back to the video system with shaking hands, hyper-aware of the conversation continuing in low tones behind him. He worked as quickly as possible, testing connections, verifying the repair. Every second felt like an eternity. When he finally packed up his tools and headed for the door, Victor was mid-sentence about shareholder concerns. Neither of them acknowledged Marcus's departure. He made it to his small office and leaned against the closed door, his pulse hammering. The smart thing would be to go home, forget what he'd heard, and never mention it to anyone. Discretion. That's what Elena valued. But the look in her eyes when she'd realized he was there, that hadn't been anger. It had been calculation. Like she was testing him again, measuring him against some standard he didn't understand. Around 8 that evening, when the executive floor was dark and silent except for the glow of emergency lighting, his tablet pinged with a message. It was from Elena's private email, sent directly to his work account. Your discretion is noted and appreciated. E.R. 7 words. No explanation, no context. But Marcus stared at them until his eyes blurred, trying to decode the meaning underneath. She'd been testing him deliberately, or had she simply seized an opportunity when it presented itself? Either way, she'd watched him overhear a confidential conversation and choose silence. And she'd acknowledged it. The pieces were falling into place, forming a pattern Marcus was only beginning to understand. Elena Reeves hadn't promoted him because of what happened when he walked in on her changing. She'd promoted him because she needed someone in her immediate environment who understood discretion without being told, who could solve problems efficiently without requiring management, who would choose silence over gossip even when it cost him nothing to talk. She'd been watching him long before that frosted glass door swung open. and she was still watching him now. The following week, Elena requested him by name for the first time. The work order came through his tablet at 2:37 in the afternoon, marked urgent with her initials in the request field. Temperature control malfunction in CEO office. Immediate response required. Marcus grabbed his equipment and made it to Elena's wing in under 8 minutes. Sarah intercepted him at the entrance, her expression tight with concern that seemed out of character for someone usually so composed. "She's been in back-to-back video conferences for 3 hours. The AC cut out 40 minutes ago, and the room's getting uncomfortable. Fix it quickly and quietly." Elena's office door stood open, and he could hear her voice as he approached, still crisp and controlled despite what had to be stifling heat building in the sealed space. "I understand your concerns about the timeline, David. What I need you to understand is that the board won't approve additional delays. We launch in 6 weeks regardless of—" Marcus slipped into the office, keeping to the perimeter, making himself as invisible as possible. The temperature was indeed uncomfortable, at least 78 degrees and climbing. Elena sat behind her massive desk, facing a wall of screens showing various video conference participants. She didn't acknowledge his presence, but he saw her shoulders relax fractionally, a tension releasing that suggested she'd been waiting for him. The thermostat was mounted behind a panel that matched the wall perfectly, designed to disappear. Marcus opened it silently and ran diagnostics on his tablet. The problem revealed itself immediately. A failed thermistor sensor sending incorrect temperature readings to the climate control system's PID controller. The processor thought the room was 65 degrees and it shut down cooling accordingly. He had a replacement sensor in his bag, always carried extras of the most common failure points. "We've been over this. Marketing doesn't drive the launch schedule. Product readiness does. If your team can't deliver the campaign materials by week 4, we'll find someone who can." Marcus worked in absolute silence, replacing the sensor, recalibrating the system through his tablet, testing the response. The diagnostic confirmed proper communication between thermostat and air handler. He adjusted the PID tuning parameters to optimize response time, then verified the analog voltage output matched the set point curve. Cool air began flowing through the vents within minutes, the soft rush of circulation barely audible over Elena's conference call. He allowed himself a glance toward her and found her watching him in the reflection of her darkened screens, her eyes tracking his movements, even as she verbally dismantled someone's excuses about deliverable timelines. "Much better. Now that we can all think clearly again, let's discuss realistic deliverables instead of aspirational ones." It wasn't about the temperature. She was talking to him, acknowledging the fix without breaking her focus on the meeting. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of competence between two professionals who understood their roles. He packed up his tools and left as quietly as he'd entered. 10 minutes later, another message appeared on his tablet. "Efficient work. Thank you. ER." 3 days after that, she asked for him again. A malfunctioning outlet in her private conference room discovered 15 minutes before a meeting with potential investors. Marcus replaced the outlet and its GFCI protection in under 10 minutes, while Elena reviewed presentation materials at the table, her presence a constant weight in his peripheral vision that made him hyper-aware of every movement. Then again, a flickering light above her desk that she said was disrupting her focus during late-night work sessions. Marcus diagnosed a failing ballast in the LED driver circuit and replaced the entire fixture rather than patch it, ensuring she wouldn't have the same problem in 6 months. A coffee maker in her private kitchen that refused to function. Marcus traced the issue to a failed heating element and hard water buildup in the reservoir. He replaced both components and descaled the entire system, then left instructions for monthly maintenance that would prevent future failures. A loose door handle that caught on her sleeve. Marcus tightened the set screws, lubricated the mechanism, and adjusted the strike plate alignment so the latch engaged smoothly. Small things, easily fixed, but each request came directly from her through his tablet, bypassing the normal work order system. And each one felt like another layer of something being built between them, brick by invisible brick. Marcus began to understand the real reason she'd promoted him. It wasn't just about discretion regarding what happened in her office. It was about reliability without supervision. Elena Sterling had built her entire life around control, and she needed someone in her immediate environment who could solve problems efficiently without requiring explanation or validation. She needed someone who understood what she needed before she had to ask for it. He started anticipating issues, noticed when the temperature in her wing fluctuated, and adjusted it before she felt the change. Identified a pattern in the lighting system that caused a brief flicker every third day, and replaced the timer module before it failed completely. Kept spare parts for every system she used regularly stored in his office for immediate access. And slowly, incrementally, the distance between them began to close. It started with simple acknowledgments, a nod when he arrived to fix something, a quiet thank you when he left, then actual words beyond professional courtesy. "You're here early." Marcus looked up from the smoke detector he was replacing to find Elena standing in her office doorway, a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. It was 7:15 in the morning, 30 minutes before her first scheduled meeting. The executive floor was still mostly empty, the controlled chaos of the workday not yet begun. "Wanted to finish before your first meeting, ma'am. Sarah mentioned you have investors at 8:30. "You read the briefings?" It wasn't a question, but he heard approval underneath. "Helps me plan my work around your schedule. Less disruption that way." Elena had been reviewing something on her tablet, but she looked up at that, studying him with those dark eyes that still made his pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with fear anymore. "Most people on my staff do the minimum required and nothing more. Why don't you?" The question caught him off guard. Marcus secured the new smoke detector before answering, giving himself time to choose his words carefully. "I have a daughter. She deserves better than minimum effort. This job, what you did for me giving me this position, changed our lives. Seemed like the least I could do was earn it." Something flickered across Elena's face, too quick to identify before her mask reasserted itself. "Your daughter. She's 7. "Yes, ma'am. Lily." The name felt intimate somehow, personal in a way that made him hesitate. But Elena was watching him expectantly, genuine interest breaking through her professional reserve. "She's in 1st grade. Loves art, hates math homework. Wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up because she likes animals better than people most days." "Just the two of you?" "Just us. Her mother left before she was born. It's been me and Lily against the world ever since." Elena was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable in the soft morning light filtering through her office windows. "That must be difficult." "It's everything." Then, because she'd opened the door, Marcus heard himself ask what he'd been wondering since that first morning. "What about you? Is there—" He stopped, realizing too late he was crossing a line he had no business approaching. But Elena smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips that transformed her face for just a second. "No one. Building an empire doesn't leave much time for personal entanglements. And most people want something from me. Power, connections, proximity to success. It becomes difficult to know what's real." The honesty in her voice startled him. This was vulnerability, genuine and offered freely, and Marcus didn't know what to do with it. I can't imagine what that's like, not trusting people's intentions. Can't you? Elena's eyes held his. You trusted your daughter's mother. She left. Now you raise Lily alone, working yourself to exhaustion to provide for her. I'd imagine trust is complicated for you too. She was right. The recognition settled between them, an understanding that neither of them had expected to find here in her office at 7:15 in the morning while he stood on a ladder replacing a smoke detector. I should finish this. His voice came out rougher than intended. Yes. But she didn't leave. She stayed there, working on her tablet while he completed the installation, and her presence felt less like surveillance and more like companionship. When he climbed down and packed his tools, she looked up one more time. Thank you, Marcus. It was the first time she'd used his first name. The sound of it in her voice rewired something in his brain, created a connection he wasn't sure he wanted, and definitely didn't know how to handle. Any time, Miss Reeves. He left before he could say something stupid, but he felt her watching him all the way to the door. The day everything changed started ordinarily enough. A Thursday in late October with Seattle rain streaking the windows and the executive floor humming with its usual controlled energy. Marcus arrived at 6:30 for the morning briefing, coffee in hand, prepared for another day of invisible efficiency. Sarah ran through the schedule with her usual precision: video conferences, department reviews, a site visit from a tech journalist, and an all-hands presentation at 4 in the main auditorium, where Elena would announce the new product line to employees, press, and investors. The presentation is particularly important. Miss Reeves will be announcing the Quantum series. There will be press, investors, and all senior staff. Everything needs to be perfect. Marcus made notes on his tablet. The auditorium was technically outside his jurisdiction, but he coordinated with the facilities team to ensure all executive floor systems would be stable during the event. Elena would be under intense scrutiny, and the last thing she needed was a technical failure making her look unprepared. The morning proceeded smoothly. He handled routine maintenance, responded to a minor printer malfunction in the finance director's office, replaced a burned-out LED in one of the conference rooms. Around 2, he decided to check the auditorium personally, just to verify everything the facilities team had reported. The main auditorium seated 300 people and featured a stage with professional lighting, video screens, and sound systems sophisticated enough for concert venues. The facilities team had done good work. Everything looked pristine, the technology tested and ready. Marcus was about to leave when something made him look up at the lighting rig suspended above the stage. Years of maintenance work had trained his eyes to spot things that weren't quite right. Subtle misalignments that suggested potential problems brewing beneath the surface. One of the stage lights looked off-center, its mounting bracket slightly twisted in a way that didn't match the others. He found a ladder and climbed up to inspect it more closely. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The safety cable, the backup that prevented lights from falling if the main mount failed, was frayed nearly through. Not from age or wear, but from what looked like deliberate cutting. Someone had sawed through most of the strands, leaving just enough intact that it wouldn't be immediately obvious, but would fail under the right stress. And the main mounting bolt was loose, turned back several threads, held in place by friction alone rather than proper torque. Marcus's hand shook as he examined the setup. This wasn't accident or neglect. This was sabotage, deliberate and calculated. The light weighed at least 40 pounds. If it fell during the presentation directly onto the stage where Elena would be standing? He didn't let himself finish the thought. Working quickly, he secured the mounting bolt properly with his torque wrench, verified the thread engagement met specification, tested the weight distribution. Then he replaced the safety cable entirely with new aircraft-grade steel line rated for 5 times the load. He checked every other light in the rig systematically, found 2 more with loosened bolts, and corrected them all. By the time he finished, he'd been in the auditorium for 90 minutes, and his shirt was soaked with sweat, despite the climate control. The question burning in his mind was whether to report this, tell Sarah, security, someone. If this was deliberate sabotage, there were protocols, investigations, potential danger to Elena that extended beyond a rigged light fixture. But he had no proof beyond his professional judgment. The frayed cable could theoretically be explained as wear, though the cut pattern was too clean, too precise. The loose bolts might be attributed to poor maintenance by someone who didn't know proper torque specifications. And if he was wrong, if he raised alarms that led nowhere, he'd look paranoid or attention-seeking at best, incompetent at worst. Worse, he put himself directly in Elena's line of sight in a way that violated everything she valued about him. She needed him to be invisible, to solve problems quietly without creating drama, not to generate crises based on suspicions he couldn't prove. Marcus made his decision. He documented everything with photos on his tablet, secured the systems, made a note to check them again before the presentation. Then he went back to the executive floor and tried to act like his heart wasn't racing with the implications of what he'd found. At 3:30, Sarah sent a message asking him to verify the video feeds in the auditorium one final time. Marcus went back down, checked the lights again. Still secure. All systems operational. People were already filling the seats, press photographers setting up cameras. The energy in the room built like a gathering storm waiting to break. Elena arrived at 3:55, flanked by Sarah and 2 senior executives Marcus recognized from company newsletters. She wore a deep blue suit that commanded attention without demanding it, her hair pulled back severely, her expression calm and confident. The CEO in her element, ready to shape the narrative and control the room. Marcus watched from the shadows at the back of the auditorium as she took the stage, tested the microphone, surveyed the crowd with the control of someone who owned every room she entered. Their eyes met across the distance. Elena's gaze held his for just a moment, something passing between them that might have been acknowledgement, or might have been his imagination reading meaning into coincidence. Then she turned her attention to her notes, and Marcus forced himself to breathe. The presentation began. Elena spoke with a kind of authority that made people lean forward in their seats, commanded attention through competence rather than volume. She outlined the new product line with precision, fielded questions from journalists with sharp intelligence, moved through her slides with the confidence of someone who'd practiced every transition until it became muscle memory. Marcus stood near the lighting controls, watching not the presentation, but the equipment. The stage lights held steady. The video screens displayed perfectly. Everything was working exactly as it should. He started to relax, started to think maybe he'd been wrong about the sabotage. Maybe the damage had been just neglect after all, coincidence and poor maintenance, rather than malicious intent. Then the light directly above center stage shifted. It was subtle, a slight rotation on its mount that most people wouldn't notice, but Marcus saw it immediately, and his blood turned to ice. Someone was in the lighting catwalk above the stage, moving through shadows 60 feet up. He could see the silhouette adjusting something, working on the rigging with purpose that spoke of knowledge and planning. Marcus moved before thinking, racing toward the stage access stairs. He had to get up there, had to stop whatever was happening. But the stairs were on the opposite side of the auditorium, and Elena was directly under that light, still speaking, unaware of the danger gathering above her like a storm about to break. The light shifted again, rotated further. The sabotaged mount he'd fixed earlier was holding, but now someone was actively working to override his repairs, manipulating the system in real time. Marcus abandoned stealth and ran, his boots pounding against the auditorium floor, drawing attention from the crowd like ripples spreading across still water. He saw security guards starting the move, confused by the commotion. Saw Sarah's startled face turning toward him. Saw Elena pause mid-sentence, her eyes finding him in the crowd with an expression that mixed confusion and authority. "Get away from center stage!" Marcus shouted, his voice carrying in the sudden silence that fell like a curtain dropping. "Now!" Elena froze. Years of control kept her rooted to the spot, confusion and authority warring on her face. The light above her groaned, metal straining against compromised connections that had been weakened beyond their design limits. Marcus didn't have time to explain, didn't have time for anything except action. He launched himself onto the stage, grabbed Elena around the waist, and threw both of them sideways with every ounce of strength he possessed. They hit the stage floor hard. Marcus twisted to take the impact on his shoulder, felt something crack in his collarbone, wrapped his arms around Elena to protect her from the fall. Half a second later, 40 pounds of metal and glass crashed into the exact spot where she'd been standing. The mounting bracket finally gave way with a shriek of tortured steel. The light exploded on impact with a sound like a gunshot. Shattered glass sprayed across the stage in a glittering wave. Sparks flew from severed electrical connections, small fires igniting in the debris. The crowd erupted in chaos, screaming, people running, security converging from all directions in a coordinated response that looked choreographed but was born from pure instinct and training. But Marcus only registered Elena in his arms, her body pressed against his, her heart hammering so hard he could feel it through their clothes, through skin and bone, through every barrier that had existed between them until this moment. Her dark eyes were wide with shock, her perfect composure shattered like the glass scattered around them, and she was shaking. "Are you hurt?" Marcus demanded, his hands moving over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with a desperation that overrode every professional boundary. "Did the glass hit you?" "I'm fine." Elena's voice trembled despite the words, breaking on the edges. How did you know?" "I'll explain later. Right now, we need to." Security surrounded them, pulling them apart with practiced efficiency. Voices shouting questions and orders. Marcus caught a glimpse of figures fleeing from the catwalk access, saw guards racing after them through exits most people didn't know existed. Sarah was there suddenly, her professional mask cracked with genuine terror that transformed her features, helping Elena to her feet. "I'm fine," Elena said again, louder now, authority returning to her voice even as her hands shook visibly. "Everyone calm down. Clear the auditorium in an orderly fashion. Sarah, get security to..." "On it." Sarah was already coordinating on her phone, directing evacuation procedures with the kind of competence that came from drilling for scenarios you hoped would never happen. Elena's eyes found Marcus again. He was still on the stage floor, his shoulders screaming where he'd absorbed their combined impact, glass scattered around him like diamonds catching stage lights. Blood ran from a cut on his arm where a shard had caught him during the fall. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." She moved toward him, but Sarah intercepted her gently, physically placing herself between CEO and maintenance tech. "We need to get you to a secure location until security sweeps the building. Please, Elena." For a moment, Marcus thought Elena would refuse. Thought she would push past Sarah and close the distance between them. But she let herself be guided toward the exit, looking back at him one last time with an expression he couldn't read. Shock mingling with gratitude, mingling with something deeper that made his breath catch despite the pain radiating from his shoulder. Then she was gone, and Marcus was surrounded by security personnel asking questions he barely heard. His mind replaying those seconds on a loop. The weight of Elena in his arms, the terror in her eyes, the absolute certainty that if he'd been 1 second slower, she would have died right there on that stage in front of 300 witnesses. And somewhere in the chaos, Marcus realized that invisible was no longer an option. He'd thrown himself into the spotlight to save her, and nothing between them would ever be the same. The security office on the 2nd floor became command central within minutes of the auditorium evacuation. Marcus sat in a hard plastic chair while a paramedic cleaned the gash on his forearm, the sting of antiseptic barely registering against the adrenaline still flooding his system. Around him, guards spoke in clipped tones into radios, coordinating a building-wide lockdown while reviewing security footage on a wall of monitors that showed every angle of the disaster. "You're lucky. Another inch, and this would have needed stitches." The paramedic wrapped gauze around his arm with practiced efficiency. Marcus didn't feel lucky. He felt like his entire body was vibrating at a frequency just below visible, his mind replaying those seconds on the stage over and over. The groan of metal, Elena's body against his, the explosion of glass where she'd been standing moments before. "Mr. Rivera." The head of security, Thomas Reed, pulled up a chair. Former police detective with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too many crimes to be shocked by much. His expression was grave in a way that made Marcus's stomach tighten. "Walk me through what happened. Start with why you were checking the auditorium in the first place." Marcus explained about the morning briefing, his decision to personally verify the systems, finding the frayed safety cable and loose mounting bolts. He showed Reed the photos on his tablet, time-stamped from hours before the presentation, documentation that proved he'd found the sabotage early, fixed it, secured everything properly. "You repaired it, made everything safe according to specifications. So how did the light still fall?" "Someone was up in the catwalk during the presentation. I saw movement, saw them working on something. They must have loosened it again or found another way to compromise the mount after I left." Reed's jaw tightened, muscles working beneath skin weathered by years of dealing with threats both real and imagined. "Did you see a face? Any identifying features?" "No, just a silhouette. Dark clothes moving fast. They knew what they were doing, had tools, understood the rigging system well enough to sabotage it properly." "And you didn't report the initial damage when you found it this afternoon?" The question carried weight, not quite accusation, but close enough to make Marcus's throat constrict. "I considered it, but I had no proof it was deliberate. Could have been negligent maintenance by someone who didn't know proper torque specs. I documented everything, fixed the immediate danger, and planned to monitor it closely. I didn't expect someone to actively interfere during the event itself." Reed studied him for a long moment, weighing truth against procedure, outcomes against intentions. "Your quick thinking saved Ms. Reeves's life. I want to be clear about that. But this situation is now a criminal investigation, attempted murder, possibly corporate espionage. You'll need to make a formal statement. Detective Parker from Seattle PD is on her way." "Whatever you need." The door opened and Sarah appeared, her usual composure restored but strain visible around her eyes, like cracks in porcelain. "Mr. Rivera, Mrs. Reeves wants to see you now." Reed nodded his permission. Marcus followed Sarah through corridors now patrolled by additional security, past employees gathered in worried clusters whispering theories and speculation, to the executive floor. The atmosphere up here was tense. Assistants speaking in hushed voices, senior executives behind closed doors conducting damage control. Sarah led him not to Elena's office, but to a smaller conference room he'd never entered before. Elena stood at the window, her back to the door, still in the blue suit but with her hair down now, falling in waves across her shoulders. She didn't turn when they entered. "Leave us." Sarah hesitated, professional concern warring with loyalty. "Elena, security protocols suggest I'm safe with Marcus." Elena's voice was soft but absolute, carrying the kind of finality that ended arguments before they began. "Leave us, Sarah." The door closed with a click that seemed too loud in the silence. Marcus stood just inside the room, unsure whether to speak or wait, his heart hammering against his ribs hard enough to hurt. The cut on his arm throbbed in time with his pulse. "You tackled me," Elena said finally, still facing the window where Seattle spread out below like a circuit board lit with evening traffic. "In front of 300 people. You grabbed me and threw us both to the ground." "I'm sorry. I didn't have time to—" "Don't apologize." She turned, and the expression on her face stopped his words. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup slightly smudged in a way he'd never seen before, her carefully maintained mask completely gone, stripped away by proximity to death. This wasn't the Ice Queen who commanded boardrooms and dismantled competitors. This was a woman confronting her own mortality. Every defense shattered. "You saved my life. Do you understand that? If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't seen that light shifting, I would be dead right now. My skull crushed by 40 pounds of metal and glass while 300 people watched." The rawness in her voice hit him like a physical blow, made his chest constrict with an emotion he didn't have a name for. "I saw the sabotage this afternoon when I was checking the auditorium. The frayed cable, the loose bolts. I fixed it, secured everything properly. But I should have reported it immediately. Should have insisted they cancel the presentation until—" "You did exactly what you should have done." Elena crossed the room, stopping 3 feet from him, close enough that he could see she was still trembling despite the steel in her voice. "You identified a threat, neutralized it, and stayed vigilant. When the danger evolved, you acted without hesitation. That's not something to apologize for." "I'm just a maintenance tech. I fix broken things. I'm not trained for—" "You're the man who saved my life." Elena's eyes held his with an intensity that made breathing difficult, made the air between them feel charged with electricity. "Don't tell me what you are or aren't, Marcus Rivera. I know exactly what you are." The way she said his name rewired something fundamental in his chest. Marcus found himself taking a step closer, drawn by gravity he couldn't resist and didn't want to fight anymore. What happened up there on that stage wasn't about maintaining your image or protecting the company's reputation. That was about you. Just you. And I would do it again without thinking twice. Elena's breath caught audibly. For a moment, Marcus thought she might say something that would change everything between them, dissolve every professional boundary they'd been pretending still existed. But then her phone buzzed, shattering the moment might glass, and she looked away. Security found evidence in the catwalk. Tools, cut cables, a backpack with additional sabotage equipment. They're reviewing all footage from the building. Whoever did this will be caught. Her voice was steadier now, rebuilding composure piece by piece like assembling armor. "Do you know why someone would target you like this?" A bitter smile crossed Elena's face, transforming her features into something harder. "I'm a young woman running a multi-billion-dollar company in an industry dominated by men who think they deserve what I have. I've made enemies acquiring competitors, refusing partnerships that would have benefited them, choosing merit over politics. The list of people who'd benefit from my death is longer than I'd like to admit." The casual way she said it, people who'd benefit from my death, made Marcus's hands curl into fists at his sides. That's not normal. That's not acceptable. It's reality, and now I have to decide how to handle it. Cancel the product launch, increase security, show weakness to everyone watching for me to fail, or push forward and prove that whoever tried to kill me failed. You show strength by staying alive. Everything else is secondary. Elena looked at him with something that might have been wonder, like he'd said something profound instead of obvious. You really believe that? I know what it's like to have someone depending on you. To know that your choices, your survival, determines their entire world. Marcus thought of Lily, probably finishing her homework right now at Margaret's apartment, unaware of how close she'd come to losing him today. You have thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on this company continuing to function. You owe it to them to protect yourself first. Is that the only reason? The employees? The question hung between them, heavy with implications Marcus wasn't ready to examine. Before he could answer, the door opened and Reed appeared with 2 other security personnel flanking him. Miss Reeves, we have a situation. We've identified the individual in the catwalk footage. Elena's spine straightened, authority flooding back into her posture like water filling a vessel. Show me. They moved to a larger conference room where security had set up a command center. On the main screen, frozen footage showed a man in dark maintenance coveralls accessing the catwalk 20 minutes before the presentation began. The image quality was good enough to see his face clearly. Mid-40s, sharp features, the kind of face that blended into corporate environments without raising questions or triggering memory. His name is Michael Barnes. Reed pulled up additional files, personnel records, and background checks scrolling across adjacent monitors. He's been with building maintenance for 8 months. Background check was clean, references verified. We just discovered his employment application used a false social security number. The real Michael Barnes died in a car accident in Oregon 3 years ago. Someone planted him. Elena's voice was tight. Controlled fury barely contained beneath the surface, like magma pressing against stone. That's our assessment. We're searching his locker and apartment now, contacting federal authorities. But there's more. Reed pulled up another image. A screenshot of an email from an anonymous account. Text harsh against the white background. This was sent to 3 business journalists 40 minutes ago, before the incident. It claims you've been inflating revenue numbers to boost stock prices, cooking the books to hide operational losses. The timing suggests whoever sent it expected you to be in no position to defend yourself. Marcus felt sick. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was coordinated destruction. Kill Elena, release damaging accusations, tank the company's value all at once. Someone had planned this with precision that spoke to resources and inside knowledge. The allegations are false, Elena stated flatly, no room for doubt in her tone. Our books are audited quarterly by independent firms with reputations they won't risk for anyone. But proving that will take time, and the accusation alone will damage investor confidence, create uncertainty in the market. Not if you're standing in front of cameras tomorrow, very much alive with security footage showing an attempted murder that coincides with fraudulent allegations. Reed countered, tactical mind already working through counter moves. That's not whistleblowing. That's conspiracy. The narrative becomes someone tried to murder you and frame you simultaneously. Create sympathy instead of suspicion. We need to find Barnes before he disappears. And I want to know who hired him, who funded this operation. We're on it. In the meantime, I'm assigning personal security. You don't go anywhere without— No! Elena's voice cut like steel, sharp enough to make Reed stop mid-sentence. I'm not hiding behind bodyguards like I'm afraid. We handle this intelligently, but I won't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me cower." Reed looked like he wanted to argue, but knew better than to push when Elena used that tone. At minimum, you need someone watching your immediate environment.
Someone you trust who's already proven they can identify threats others miss.
Elena's eyes found Marcus across the room. Something passed between them, a silent conversation that excluded everyone else in the space. Understanding flowing through a channel they'd built over weeks of small interactions and shared silences. Marcus stays close. He's already proven he can spot what your trained security personnel missed. He works on the executive floor anyway. Nothing changes visibly, but he's there. Miss Reeves, with respect, Mr. Rivera is maintenance staff, not a security professional. Reed's objection was careful, diplomatic, acknowledging hierarchy while raising legitimate concerns. Mr. Rivera saved my life while your security personnel were watching cameras and patrolling hallways. I trust his instincts. He stays. Reed nodded reluctantly, tactical disagreement overridden by executive decision. We'll need to brief him on protocols, provide communication equipment, coordinate response procedures. Fine, do it now. I want this handled tonight. Elena turned to Marcus, her expression unreadable behind the mask she'd rebuilt. Unless you have objections to expanding your responsibilities beyond electrical systems. Marcus thought about what he was being asked. Thought about Lily, about the risk of putting himself between Elena and whoever wanted her dead. Thought about walking away, choosing safety, protecting the fragile stability they'd finally achieved. But when he looked at Elena, really looked at her, he saw the vulnerability she was hiding behind steel and authority. Saw someone who'd built walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore, who trusted so few people that asking him to stay close was an act of profound faith that cost her more than anyone watching understood. No objections. Whatever you need. The relief that flashed across Elena's face was so brief he almost missed it. But it had been there, real and raw, before she locked it away again behind professional distance. The next 3 hours were a blur of security briefings, equipment distribution, coordination with law enforcement. Marcus was fitted with a discreet earpiece that connected him to the security network, shown emergency protocols and evacuation routes, given access codes for systems he'd never imagined needing. Reed ran him through threat assessment basics with the patience of someone who'd trained countless personnel. Your job isn't to engage threats. It's to get Miss Reeves to safety and alert us immediately. You see something suspicious, you call it in. Understand? Understood. Though privately, Marcus wondered what he'd actually do if someone threatened Elena in his presence.
The tackle on stage had been pure instinct, and he suspected his instincts wouldn't wait for security protocols or proper channels. It was nearly 11 when he finally made it home. Margaret had put Lily to bed hours ago, leaving a note about the math homework she'd struggled with and the chicken soup warming in the slow cooker. Marcus stood in his daughter's doorway, watching her sleep, stuffed rabbit clutched in small hands, and felt the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him like gravity increasing. He'd crossed so many lines today. Professional boundaries, class divisions, the careful distance he'd maintained between himself and the world Elena inhabited. And tomorrow, he'd cross more, standing close to her, not as invisible maintenance staff, but as something else entirely. Something he didn't have a name for yet. His phone buzzed, a message from Elena's private number sent to his personal cell, the one only Margaret and Lily's school had. The intimacy of that connection, her having access to contact him outside work systems, made his pulse quicken.
Thank you for today, for everything. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be complicated.
ER. Marcus stared at those words until his eyes blurred. She had his personal number, had reached out after hours, had thanked him like a person rather than an employee. He typed back carefully, aware that every word carried weight now. "You're welcome. See you at 7. Her response came immediately, faster than he expected. 6:30. We have work to do before the day starts. Marcus smiled despite everything. Of course she did. Elena Reeves didn't waste time on normal schedules or conventional approaches. She'd nearly died today, and tomorrow she'd be back at her desk before dawn, planning counter-moves while everyone else was still processing what happened. The next morning arrived with news spreading through channels Marcus didn't have access to, but could feel in the tension that saturated the executive floor. Michael Barnes had been apprehended trying to board a flight to Mexico at 2 a.m. His apartment had yielded a burner phone with encrypted messages coordinating the attack, along with $50,000 in cash still bundled with bank wrappers. He was in custody, not talking, but law enforcement was confident they could trace the money back to its source. It was only a matter of time before the conspiracy unraveled completely. Marcus arrived at the executive floor at 6:15 to find it already buzzing with activity, more intense than usual. Sarah intercepted him immediately, her expression complex, mixing professional courtesy with something that might have been concern or warning. "Ms. Reeves is in her office. She asked for you directly." Sarah's tone carried an edge Marcus couldn't quite decode, something underneath the words. "Whatever's happening between you two, be careful. She's under enormous pressure right now, and she makes decisions based on control and strategy. Don't mistake proximity for something it isn't." The warning was clear, probably wise, born from years of watching Elena navigate relationships through the lens of utility and advantage. Marcus nodded his understanding and knocked on Elena's office door. "Come in." She sat behind her desk, already dressed for battle in a charcoal suit that could have been armor, her hair pulled back severely. But her eyes were softer when she looked at him, carrying memories of yesterday's vulnerability like a secret only they shared. "How's your arm?" "Fine. Barely feel it." Marcus closed the door behind him, aware of crossing a threshold that had nothing to do with physical space. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't." Elena gestured to the chair across from her desk with weary acceptance of her own limitations. "I spent the night reviewing everyone who might have orchestrated this. Business rivals, disgruntled former employees, board members who opposed my leadership. The list is extensive and depressing. Reed will find the connection. The money trail always leads somewhere eventually." "That's not what worries me." Elena leaned back, studying him with an intensity that made the air feel charged between them. "What worries me is that I've built my entire life around not needing anyone. Control, independence, self-reliance. And yesterday, I needed you. Absolutely, completely needed you to save my life. That's not a position I'm comfortable occupying." The honesty stunned him. Marcus chose his next words carefully, aware they carried weight that would shape whatever came next. "Needing someone in a crisis doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." "I'm not sure I'm allowed to be human." "Not in this position. Weakness is blood in the water. Every competitor, every skeptical board member, every journalist looking for a story, they're all waiting for me to prove I don't belong here. So prove them wrong. Show up today stronger than yesterday. Face the cameras, address the allegations, demonstrate that whoever tried to kill you failed spectacularly. That's not weakness. That's power." Elena's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but held warmth underneath. "You make it sound simple." "I didn't say it was simple.
I said it was necessary. Marcus leaned forward, holding her gaze despite every instinct screaming that he was overstepping bounds that existed for good reason. You asked me yesterday what you are to me. You want the truth? You're the person who changed my daughter's life by giving me a chance I didn't deserve. You're the woman who works 18-hour days to protect thousands of employees she'll never meet. And you're someone who shouldn't have to face death threats and character assassination alone. The silence that followed felt alive, charged with everything they weren't saying. Elena's eyes searched his face like she was looking for proof he meant it, that this wasn't performance or manipulation designed to gain advantage. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone be close without wondering what they want from me. I don't want anything except for you to be safe. That's it. That's all of it. That might be the most valuable thing anyone's ever offered me. Elena visibly gathered herself, straightening in her chair, rebuilding the armor she needed to face the day ahead. Today's agenda is brutal. Press conference at 9 addressing yesterday's incident and the false allegations. Board meeting at 11 where I'll need to reassure everyone the company is stable. Investor calls this afternoon. I need you close for all of it. I'll be there. The press conference was held in the main lobby, transformed into a media staging area. Cameras and journalists packed into every available space, creating a forest of equipment and expectation. Marcus stood off to the side, his new earpiece connecting him to security channels, watching Elena command the room with absolute authority that seemed undiminished by yesterday's near-death experience. She addressed the assassination attempt directly, framed it as corporate sabotage coordinated with false financial allegations designed to destroy both her and the company. She presented security footage that made the conspiracy impossible to deny, showed documentation from independent auditors that demolished the accounting fraud claims, and delivered it all with the kind of precision that left no room for doubt or speculation. Someone wanted to destroy this company by destroying me. They failed. Sterling Technologies stands stronger today than yesterday. And we will not be intimidated by criminals and cowards who hide behind anonymous emails and hired assassins. The journalists erupted with questions. Elena fielded them with sharp intelligence, never defensive, always in control. And twice during the conference, her eyes found Marcus in the crowd, drawing strength from his presence in a way that felt intimate despite the hundreds of people watching. When it ended, Sarah intercepted them before they could return to the executive floor, urgency written across her features. The board wants to meet immediately. Victor Donovan is calling for a vote of confidence. Elena's expression hardened, jaw setting in a way Marcus had learned meant she was preparing for battle. Of course he is. Let's not keep them waiting. The boardroom was on the 62nd floor, all glass walls and panoramic city views, designed to remind everyone inside that they operated at the pinnacle of power, where decisions shaped markets and futures. 12 board members sat around a massive table, their expressions ranging from supportive to hostile, with various shades of calculation between. Victor Donovan occupied the chair directly opposite where Elena would sit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit projecting authority earned through decades. His eyes gleamed with something that looked like satisfaction, barely concealed beneath professional concern. Elena, glad you could join us. We've been discussing yesterday's unfortunate incident and its implications for company leadership. Unfortunate is an interesting word for attempted murder, Victor. Elena took her seat with controlled grace. Marcus positioned himself near the door, unobtrusive but present, his eyes tracking every board member's reaction. Quite right. Which is why we need to discuss your security protocols, your decision-making process, and whether the company's interests are best served by maintaining current leadership during this crisis. So there it was, not concern for Elena's safety, but an opportunity to challenge her position, exploit vulnerability to advance agendas that had nothing to do with the company's success. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides, anger flooding through him, hot and immediate. My security protocols are being enhanced as we speak. The individual responsible is in custody. Law enforcement is tracking the conspiracy's origins, and the false financial allegations have been thoroughly debunked by our auditors. What exactly is your concern, Victor? My concern is that someone wanted you dead badly enough to plan for months, plant an operative in this building for 8 months, coordinate a sophisticated assassination attempt. That suggests enemies powerful enough to threaten this company's stability. Perhaps it's time to consider whether your leadership style has created untenable risks for all of us. My leadership style doubled our value in 2 years and made everyone at this table significantly wealthier. What you're actually suggesting is that I should step aside so someone more pliable, someone easier to control, can take over. That's not risk management, Victor. That's a power play. That's not what I'm saying. It's exactly what you're saying. Elena leaned forward, her eyes locked on Victor with laser focus. You've opposed every major decision I've made since I took over. The Techline acquisition you said would bankrupt us generated $30 million in revenue last quarter. The restructuring you called reckless improved operational efficiency by 18%. You don't question my competence, Victor. You question my right to have it simply because I'm young and female and didn't earn this position through 40 years of political maneuvering. The room fell silent. Other board members shifted uncomfortably, some nodding slightly, others maintaining careful neutrality that spoke to allegiances Marcus couldn't map. I move that we table this discussion. Helen Chang, one of the older board members, spoke up with authority born from owning enough shares to matter. Elena has handled this crisis with exactly the leadership we hired her to provide. The threats against her are proof of her effectiveness, not evidence of failure. Someone powerful enough to orchestrate this level of attack sees her as a genuine threat to their interests. That's validation, not weakness. Seconded. Daniel Brooks, a venture capitalist who'd backed Elena's early initiatives, added his support with firm conviction. Victor's jaw tightened, muscles working beneath skin that suddenly looked older, more weathered. Fine, but I want regular updates on the investigation, and I want enhanced security measures that don't rely on— His eyes flicked dismissively toward Marcus. Maintenance staff playing hero. Noted. Elena's voice was cold enough to frost glass. Anything else? The meeting continued for another hour, reviewing financial projections and operational updates, but the tension never fully dissipated. Marcus watched Victor throughout, noting how the older man's eyes kept returning to Elena, with something that went beyond professional rivalry. This was personal, rooted in resentment that had calcified over years into something harder and more dangerous. When they finally escaped back to the executive floor, Elena's composure cracked the moment her office door closed. She leaned against her desk, exhaling slowly, the weight of maintaining perfection visibly crushing down on her shoulders. He's going to keep pushing. Every crisis, every setback, he'll use it to question my leadership and undermine my authority. Then don't give him setbacks. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Succeed so loudly he can't make himself heard over the results. Marcus crossed the office slowly, aware he was entering territory they'd both avoided, closing distance that had always existed between them. How do you do that? Make it sound possible. Make me believe I can actually survive this. Because I've watched you for weeks now. I've seen how hard you work, how much you care about getting things right. You're not just competent, Elena. You're extraordinary. And anyone who can't see that is deliberately closing their eyes. Marcus, Her voice caught on his name, breaking on the syllable in a way that exposed everything she was trying to keep contained. Someone tried to kill you yesterday, and today you stood in front of cameras and the board and everyone watching for you to break. And you didn't.
You're still standing, still fighting. That's not something that needs my belief to make it real. It already is. Elena stood there 3 feet away from him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with physical danger and everything to do with the space between them that kept shrinking despite every reason it shouldn't. You scare me. Her voice was barely above a whisper, intimate in the quiet office. I scare you. You see me. Not the CEO, not the Ice Queen, not the legacy or the empire. Just me. And I don't know what to do with that. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs, every instinct screaming that they were standing on the edge of something that would change everything, destroy every professional boundary, compromise every carefully maintained distance. You don't have to do anything with it. I'm not asking for anything, Elena. I'm just here. That's all. That's not all. That's everything. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that neither of them could afford to pursue. Marcus knew they were standing at a crossroads where every choice led to complications neither of them was prepared to navigate. But before either of them could move forward or back, the door burst open and Sarah rushed in, her face pale beneath professional makeup. We have a problem. The investigators found something in Barnes's phone records. The person who hired him? It's someone inside the company.